And welcome back. If you have been on a previous webinar, and welcome if this is your first one. My name is Dr. Lauren Hodges. I'm working with the Turlock Unified School District and delivering a series of webinars, both to parents and also to the teachers and staff and administrators themselves. We're trying to help everybody by offering some resources and tools in what is a very interesting and difficult time. If you were on the last webinar, we talked about stress and stress personalities and stress awareness, how it shows up in our lives. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the body pathway. Remember, I told you that we have three kind of energy dimensions or reservoirs, pathways to resilience, and that is the body, mind, and spirit. And tonight, we're going to be focusing on the body, more specifically talking about nutrition, exercise and movement, and sleep. And for what it's worth, I'm going to be doing a lot of talking tonight, more than usual. The reason for that is this is just a lot of information, and there's usually a lot of questions that come along with that. So I'm going to do my best to protect some time at the end and throughout the conversation tonight to make sure I'm addressing those questions. Feel free to put the questions in the chat. It's a little easier for me to monitor that than the Q&A, but I can also watch that as well. So if you have any questions or comments, or you want to share anything with the group, by all means, use that chat function. So without further ado, we're going to dive right in and start with nutrition. Remember that the body in general is the most readily available source of energy. Our physical energy is really a very, very important source of being able to show up at our best. And I would imagine if I took a poll, I won't, but if I took a poll tonight and asked how many of us admit that we could be doing a little better with our nutrition, my guess is that probably 100% of us would agree, yeah, we could do a little bit better. I did get a Q&A real quick. I'm from Miami. I speak a little bit of Spanish, and it asks if there's an interpreter for Spanish. The answer is we are working on that. There is a technical issue with our Spanish interpreter, and we're doing the best we can to get to it. So I am sorry in advance if we're not able to get that interpreter worked out. So let's, again, if we took a poll and I asked, we would probably all admit we could use a little bit of help. We could do a little bit better with managing our eating habits. There's a lot of factors that get in the way of healthy eating, but if I would ask you what's getting in the way of you eating at your best, there's a lot of different reasons that people typically give us. The two most common reasons that we get for people that are having trouble with their eating habits, there's two most common answers we get. Normally, what we see as most persistent is their mindset around food. For whatever reason that might be, it would be their mindset around food, and then their misunderstanding of how to eat, and maybe not even realizing how much food has an impact on our lives as a whole. I would say that generally speaking, many of us have a very binary perception of food. When we think about food, when we make food choices, we think in very black and white terms. Is this food good for me? Is this food bad for me? Will it make me gain weight? Will I lose weight? Do I eat it or do I not? Is it something I avoid? Is it something that I go for? Some of us vilify certain foods. We stay away from them because we were told they were bad for us. Some of us avoid eating altogether to avoid gaining weight. Some of us overeat certain foods. Some of us undereat other foods. There's a lot of binary perception about food. Why do we do this? Well, there's a lot of reasons that we tend to do this. Sometimes we get confused as to what to actually eat with so much misinformation out there on the internet. Sometimes we fail to plan effectively, and so we become very reactive in our food choices. In other words, we get hangry and we tend to not make the best food choices. And sometimes we tell ourselves these stories. That's where that mindset piece comes in. Things like, I don't have time to eat well. I can't afford to eat well. So many other factors that come into play. Oh, my family has a history of poor eating habits, and so I'm destined to be the same. There's a lot of that. Even stress and emotional well-being plays a role in our eating habits. I'm going to challenge you though for the next 10 minutes or so as we talk about this. I want to pose a challenge to all the participants. I want you to zoom out to 10,000 foot view here. And I want you to look at food outside of the context of weight and outside of the context of good or bad. I want you to think about food in the context of this. How does it make you feel? How much energy does that food give you? How does it impact your long-term health, your well-being, your ability to show up at your best? So I want you to broaden your view on food. So when I'm talking about certain strategies to improve your eating habits, I want you to try your best to think about it more broadly than, is this going to make me fat or skinny, which is a very, very simple, oversimplified view of food that a lot of us carry with us all the time, kind of instinctually. For example, when you think about the last time you had a really, really unhealthy or poor choice, unhealthy meal, maybe it was a fast food meal, maybe it was a candy bar to get by through lunch. How did you feel in that time? How productive were you? How focused were you? How connected? What was your mood like? Or worse, what if you skip a meal and you go several hours without eating? How are you showing up in moments like that? And then think about the last time you had a really wholesome, nutritious meal. Everything was the right balance of different food groups, the right portions, plenty of water. Then how did you show up? And so I really want to kind of broaden our perspective on our food choices right now. So let's take a look at food through that lens for the next 10 minutes or so. Be open to some of the suggestions I might have here. I'm going to get into a little bit of the science, the nitty-gritty for a second, and kind of go back to some basics. Everything that we eat, no matter what the source is, carbohydrates, fats, proteins, breaks down into fuel that provides energy to the body and brain to get us through the day. We need every one of those macronutrients. When I say macronutrient, I mean carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. For example, fat itself, dietary fat, the fat you find in foods like avocados, nuts, seeds, oils, nut butters like peanut butter, almond butter. Fats are the primary source of stored energy for our body. They're actually required for healthy cell growth, nutrient absorption, hormone creation and transport throughout the body, fatty acid productions. So we need fat. Protein, a lot of people think of protein in terms of, does it give me muscles or not? That is very true. Protein is required for muscle tissue repair and growth, but there's so much more to protein than just muscle tissue and growth. Proteins are required, dietary proteins, for hormone creation and regulation, particularly as we get over 30 and 40 and 50. And it's also required for the regulation of our metabolism. In other words, keeping our calories burning and churning all throughout the day. Protein is also vital for feeling full and getting sustained energy throughout the day. Examples of proteins would be meats, right? So chicken, pork, beef, fish, seafood, shellfish. And then we have dairy-based proteins like cottage cheese, Greek yogurt, string cheese. We have plant-based proteins, right? Like edamame and quinoa. And then we have carbohydrates. You hear the phrase carbs are the enemy, right? That is absolutely not true. Carbohydrates themselves are the body's most readily available form of energy and fuel to the brain and the body. So think of it like your checking account, the most readily available source of cash. That's how you want to think of carbohydrates. Carbohydrates break down to glucose, the glucose molecule. It's a sugar, and our body metabolizes that sugar for energy to provide to the brain and the rest of the body to get through our day. Some examples of carbohydrates: fruits, vegetables, whole grains, anything that's a plant, your breads, your pastas, your rices, but also your juices, your sodas, your candy bars. There are simple carbohydrates. Those are going to be your juices, your sodas, your candy bars. They have a really short molecule chain and they break down into the blood sugar very quickly. So they give us very quick energy within a minute or two, but they don't last very long. They give you about an hour, 30 minutes to an hour's worth of energy. And then you have what are called more complex carbohydrates. The reason they're called complex is because they're a longer molecule chain and they take a little longer to break down in the body, even if there's the same amount of calories. That would be something like a sweet potato or brown rice or a whole grain bread versus a white bread. And they give us about 2 hours worth of energy. Proteins and fats give us about 3 to 4 hours of energy. So now you can see where we combine all of these things. We have immediate energy, and then we have sustained energy when we have a balanced plate. When we focus just on eating carbohydrates, for example, we are constantly hungry and our blood sugar is constantly fluctuating because we're not providing ourselves that long-term energy that fats and proteins provide us. So you can see where it starts to get important that you balance. Now, I want to draw your attention to that brain on the right side of the screen. Our brain is the CEO of our body. This is the boss up here, okay? And would you believe that our brain requires 20 to 30% of our daily energy intake? So let me let that sink in for a second. Think about everything that you ate yesterday. 20 to 30% of all of that went straight to powering your brain. Your brain is a glucose glutton. It loves glucose. It wants and craves and needs carbohydrates to perform at its best. When it's not being fed what it needs, so let's say you're not eating enough, you skip a meal, or you don't have a balanced meal, so you're kind of out of whack. Your brain's going to get that energy somehow, whether you like it or not. And it's going to be at the expense of other areas of the body, usually the more non-essential functions of the body, because the brain being alive and working, it's priority number one, right? And so some of the other areas of the body that are impacted, first and foremost, your metabolism. It's going to slow down to protect the brain, right? So you're going to burn less calories throughout the day. You're also going to sacrifice muscle mass. When the brain doesn't get what it wants and there's not enough glucose circulating in the bloodstream, it's going to go not to your fat deposits. Contrary to popular belief, it's actually going to hold on to your fat deposits because it's perceiving a threat in the environment when you're not feeding it. And what it's going to do is go straight to muscle tissue because it's easier to break down, convert to glucose, and provide energy to the brain. So you're sacrificing metabolism, muscle mass, cognitive function, because of course your higher order thinking is going to slow down when your brain is hungry and in need, right? Our mood, emotional regulation, your immune function, and your hormone function and regulation, right? Among other things. So in other words, your brain has to have food to function, even carbs. Carbs are not the enemy. Let me reiterate that, right? We even turn to storing fat, to be clear, because our brain, it is perceiving a threat in the environment. And much like we react to stress with cognitive impairment, our brain reacts to not getting food by triggering that stress response we talked about in our first webinar. So to be clear, any essential cognitive functions, any essential functions to life, your heart beating, oxygen circulating through your bloodstream, all of that is going to be prioritized over what you consider essential. So let's say that report you're working on for work, the meeting you're sitting in, the conversation that you're having with your loved one or your child. All of those things require you to use that new part of your brain, and all of that is considered non-essential compared to getting food. So I just want to kind of reiterate that over and over. Your brain is going to get energy whether you like it or not, and it's going to be at the expense of something else. All of that to be said. And by the way, overeating and eating highly processed foods will produce very similar results than to skipping a meal or not eating a balanced meal. Here's my point. We are wonderfully complicated, intricate machines, and all types of food serve a purpose in our body, much more broadly than just Do I look good in a bathing suit? Not saying that's not important, but it's much more important to think about food in a broader perspective. So here's the mindset shift I want to propose for you. I want you to challenge yourself for the next week. Every time that you make a food decision, you are presented with the decision to make around food. Ask yourself these questions. Is this food worthy of me? Is this food worthy of me? Does it give me energy to get by in this really hard time? Will it help me thrive through this, or will it slow me down? And here's a challenge I have for you. Eat every 3 to 4 hours and try to match your energy supply with the demands that you're facing. What that's going to do is require you to be more responsive rather than reactive with your food. You're going to have to be intentional and think ahead here a little bit around your eating habits for the day. When you do this, when you treat it like a supply demand issue, and here's what I mean by that. Energy supply is how much energy, food, you're taking in. Energy demand out is how active your day is. So if you tried to match supply and demand, you're starting to realize that you would have to eat often, much like our oscillation pattern from our first webinar. You're going to have to start eating often and regularly, not exact small meals throughout the day. So here, let me give you an example of supply demand. When is a time during your day when energy demand is a little higher? Waking up in the morning, getting ready for work, getting the kids out the door. Lord knows you chew up a lot of brain power trying to do something like that. So demand is a little higher, so supply needs to be higher. What about if you're exercising? Of course, that supply is up, so demand needs to be up, right? What about when you get off of work and you're running errands and you're running around to this baseball practice or that? Demand is high, so energy goes a little bit, supply goes a little higher. So now you start to see breakfast, lunch, and dinner start to come into play. Maybe you have a snack or a couple of small snacks through there. When you're sitting at work and you're at a computer for hours on end, and your demand is a little lower, you don't need to eat as much, hence the smaller snacks. So that's what I mean by trying to match supply with demand. So eating often every 3 to 4 hours. This is a strategy that has stood the test of time. Diets come and go, but this is something that has been scientifically validated over and over and over again as a good strategy to help keep your energy high, cognition high, brain happy, metabolism high, long-term health high. It's correlated with all of those things and improve productivity, focus. And here's the kicker for us at a time like this: improved emotional regulation and resilience against stress. So forget everything you've heard about. When should I eat? Maybe I should fast over here. I'm not saying those things don't work, but we're looking outside of weight for a moment. And we're looking at, is this food worthy of me, right? And this is a strategy that has stood the test of time. Highly recommend it. So here's an example. This is a client that I got her permission to share this with you. This was a supply demand chart I asked her to create. So it's a really good strategy, actually, if you want to try it, is creating your own supply demand chart. This is one that she has shared with me. And you can kind of see it was really funny when she first created it because she was very reactive to her eating patterns. Her energy is all over the place and wonky. I think she should have drawn her energy a little lower, but you can notice in the afternoon, she had a huge dip in her energy because she was not necessarily fueling her body in the right way. She was being very reactive and in a rush and not giving herself time to think about what she should be eating and planning and planning ahead. So if you get a chance, you should try to draw your own supply demand during a typical day for you and see where you might have opportunity to better regulate and try to eat a little bit more often. Here's an example of how she improved by trying to match supply with demand, and she got a little bit more responsive. If you notice, she's not eating more food, more calories. She's just spreading it out a little bit more. And you notice that she's a lot more regulated in her energy levels. They're high, they're not dropping significantly low. And she's not making incredibly difficult choices in her food habits either. None of these things are overly expensive. They're not expensive supplements or shakes or anything. There's no magic here, right? She would buy what's in season, what's on sale. And that's the way that I shop personally. What she is trying to do is create balanced meals in there. So that's on that note, I'm going to be providing you a couple of mindfulness strategies around food. I'm going to show you a few slides and strategies that I use with my clients. I will note, I don't use all of these at once. I recommend that you just write down the one that maybe resonates with you, that you think is something you could do and sticks with you. Wouldn't recommend trying them all at once. It could be as simple as spending the next week asking yourself, is this food worthy of me? Or as complicated as tracking all of your calories. It has to be what works for you, right? Food is one of those things that could be very triggering for people and very overcomplicated. They overthink it quite a bit. So I'm going to show you a couple of strategies and you just sort of write down what seems to work for you. And remember, we can get you a copy of this slide deck too, to take with you and kind of look through at a later date. So here's the first one. This right here, another picture that has stood the test of time. This is called the Harvard plate. This is, if you polled 100 dietitians, 100 out of 100 would agree. This is the most time-tested, healthy way to approach building your plate. So you could try to match your meals with this Harvard plate. And the Harvard plate, really what it is, and this is like your big meals, your breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Half of your plate would be vegetables and fruit. A quarter of your plate would be proteins and fat. And then a quarter of your plate would be whole grains of some sort, right? Any sort of calorie-free drink, be careful with those liquid calories. They add up quite a bit. They tend to be loaded with sugar. What if you tried to build your plate to match this? What if right now you drew a circle on a piece of paper and you told me your last meal, how did it match up to the Harvard plate? What particular food group were you glaringly missing? And how could we adjust that? I will tell you, most Americans in particular, we undereat our vegetables and we overeat our whole grains. So carbs are not the enemy, but we do tend to overeat in that area. So something to consider is trying to match your Harvard plate, the Harvard plate, with your current plate when you're building a meal, even at a restaurant. And no, you don't want the big trash can top size plates, right? These are regular plates, the regular dinner table size plates. When you're looking at snacks, you want a shrunken down version of that Harvard plate, 100 to 150 calories worth of snack, and you want balance in that snack, okay? So you want an apple and peanut butter, hummus and pita chips, a handful of almonds, and maybe a peach or something, or some carrots and hummus, whatever works for you, but balance is the key there. Balance is the key. So that's one strategy that you can use. Here's another one. This is a portion control strategy. You don't have to use this strategy, but a lot of people find it really handy. And I actually, pun intended, handy. If you hold up your hand and you look at it right now, you have a built-in portion control system right here on your body. You could use this to build your plate every time if you wanted to. And for those of you who have smaller hands in the group and those of you who have bigger hands in the group, guess what? That just means you get more or less based on your body size. Men on this call, great news for you. You get 2 hands. That's not fair, but you do. So for example, women, your protein intake to build a plate, like a breakfast, lunch, or dinner plate, your protein would be the diameter and thickness of your palm. Your vegetable would be about the size of a fist. Your carbohydrate would be about a cupped hand, and your fat would be 1 thumb serving, right? So that would be your avocado or your peanut butter or your almonds. Adds up really quickly, actually. And when you're thinking about vegetables, by the way, and proteins and things, don't underestimate that the sauces and the creaminess, those are actually part of that fat or maybe excessive carbohydrate intake. So keep factoring those things in. But generally speaking, this portion control system is really handy. And in fact, if you see on the bottom of your screen, it says graphic courtesy of precisionnutrition.com. If you have any questions at all about nutrition, I would highly recommend this is the place on the internet you go. Because let's all face it, there is a bunch of garbage information on the internet, isn't there? There's people swearing by this product or that. Usually they're making money off of that product or diet. They've got a book they wrote and they want you to buy it. There's a lot of bad information out there. Precision nutrition is just a bunch of scientists and dietitians who got together and they produce articles on anything that you want. So any nutrition question that you might have, maybe on a supplement or a current fad diet you're trying to explore, you can research it on there. And I just really like their website. I recommend all my clients to it. So portion control. Another strategy that you can use is just tapping into how you feel hunger-wise on a hunger scale. What if you tried to guide your eating around how hungry you were? I have a friend who's a dietitian and she sees really great success with her clients on this alone. What if you tried to stick between a 4 and a 6 during the day? You know, you didn't get so starved, you were weak or dizzy, down at a 1, and you weren't so full to the feeling of being sick. And that actually does help a lot of people regulate their portions a little bit. One thing I'll say though is a lot of times if you're under some serious stress or chronic stress, this hunger scale could be skewed a little bit. You know, some of us, we eat a lot more when we're stressed. We go to those comfort foods and we tend to perceive that we're hungry, but really what we're looking for is some sort of dopamine hit to feel better. And some of us, on the other hand, we don't feel hungry at all because we're just feeling kind of sick with worry or whatnot. So sometimes this could be a little bit skewed, but it is a really good way to build awareness about how hungry you are during the day. Last thing I'm going to touch on is weight. This is a question I get a lot, so I know I'm gonna address the elephant in the room, right? What about if I want to lose weight? Well, there's a way to do that without sacrificing your energy, your cognitive power, your resilience, your ability to manage stress, and that would be adding a little bit of energy expenditure to your day and taking a little bit of your food intake off. So taking a little bit of supply down and adding a little bit of demand. So let me give you an example in terms of math. If it takes 3,500 calories to lose 1 pound of fat, which it does, 3,500 calories to lose 1 pound of fat, that means that you would have to eat at a deficit of 500 calories a day in order to lose a pound a week. Well, a lot of people would say, well, that's easy. I'll just skip a meal. I'll just not eat 500 calories and then I should lose weight. Well, true, but how are you going to feel and how are you going to be able to show up when you do that? So what if you skimmed 250 calories off of whatever it is you were regularly eating right now? And that would be something like replacing the rice portion of your dinner with a vegetable, for example. That right there could be your 250 calories, right? Maybe it's half the ice cream you normally eat after dinner. That could be 250. And then on the other end, you would increase your energy expenditure by 250 calories. Maybe you take a couple 10-minute walks during the day, and there's your 250 calories. Maybe in the middle of your workday, you stop and you do squats or jumping jacks or push-ups or whatever it is. Maybe you get a band and you do some work. All of that can increase your demand out, your energy intake energy expenditure out. And then you can net out 500 calories of deficit every day. And at the end of a week, 3,500 calories, you're gonna lose a pound of fat right there. So think about ways that you can increase energy out and then skim energy coming in or food coming in. And that's a really good strategy for weight loss. So a couple ways to make this happen. High level, eat often to regulate your energy, cognition, and portions. Make sure that your meals are balanced according to that Harvard plate. Choose foods that are worthy of you. Stay hydrated. Prioritize your vegetables and proteins, particularly if you're looking to lose body fat, lose weight. And then try to reduce or minimize the sugary beverages and processed foods to about 20% of your daily intake. Really important to understand there's no food that's off limits. There really shouldn't be. You know, even your alcohol, even your birthday cake on your birthday, nothing is a bad food. We don't want to create that relationship with food. Food is life. Food is family and culture and memories and holidays. Don't take that away from yourself, but try to reduce those want foods to 20% of your total intake, and you will see a lot change in terms of your energy and maybe even your body composition and things like that. How do we make this actionable and really happen? Remember, we always want to start too small to fail. So here's a couple of suggestions that you could take this slide deck later and read through. One of them would be, track your food and your mood just once a week. See if you can find any patterns in there. How about you, on your day off, pack healthy snacks for the week? I had a client that I worked with who packed healthy snack. This is the one thing we did on her one day off from work. She packed healthy snacks. That small action back in July of last year during the pandemic, she is now 40 pounds lighter because of that one small action, because that started to build upon itself. She started to eat better because she was starting to get more energy during the day and get motivated to lose weight, which was her ultimate goal. So choose one of these small strategies to implement. All right, I'm going to stop for just a second here. Do we have any questions around nutrition? That one usually takes the longest. There's a lot of information in there. And you can throw those in the chat, or you can just take some notes real quick. Any aha moments, any strategies you want to implement, and then we can move on to movement and exercise. So I'm going to keep moving on, but if you do have any questions, you can put them in that chat for me and I'll do my best to answer them and address them. So now let's talk about movement and exercise. You've been sitting for 30 minutes now, right? About that, maybe a little bit longer, who knows? I want you to do me a favor. Wherever you are, I want you to get up and move around for just about a minute, whether it's arm circles in your seat, stand up and stretch if you can, whatever it is, I just want you to start moving your body around, okay? And I do see a couple of questions on there about nutrition, and I will get to those in a second here. So while I'm answering these questions, I want you to get up and move around, and then we're going to tap into movement and exercise. I have a question that says food that helps with inflammation. To the best of your ability, if you aren't going to the doctor and talking to them specifically about any allergies or anything like that, I would try to prioritize vegetables and proteins. If you're trying to work on reducing inflammation, typically sugars and processed foods will exacerbate inflammation. So if you really stick to kind of reducing those types of foods in your diets, juices, sodas, candies, processed foods, fast foods, trans fats, that should help with inflammation. But check with your doctor too, because there could be another underlying issue. Somebody said, is it okay to exercise on an empty stomach? I wake up and exercise, then eat. Sure. I exercise on an empty stomach, except if I'm going to be exercising longer than 60 minutes. And then I know I need a little bit more in my body. And so I'll usually do like half a banana with a little bit of peanut butter or something like that. But to answer your question, yes, absolutely. There is no good or bad. I like to try to stay away from those words, but you can certainly exercise on an empty stomach. If you feel sick, I would probably eat something. And I will say there's interesting science out there around having a little bit to eat before you work out, actually helping you burn up to like 30% more calories in your workout. But at 5:30 in the morning, when I tend to work out, I'm not that hungry. And so I don't really care. I'm just not hungry enough yet to have anything to eat. So you could go either way with that. And then I have another question that says, what about intermittent fasting? So the question I usually get about intermittent fasting is it good for me or bad? The answer is the reason that intermittent fasting works. So this is a yes and kind of response. The reason intermittent fasting works is it forces you into an eating window that essentially just tightens up how many calories you eat total a day, because you can't really overeat if you're eating within a short window. So all it's really doing, the reason it works, is it's calorie restriction. In other words, just what I was telling you before, shaving off a little bit of your supply and increasing your demand if you're working out. So yes, it works in terms of weight loss, for example. And I know plenty of people who intermittent fast and have no problems with it at all. A lot of people report it not feeling good, not being able to focus at work, not having energy, their mood is off, they don't feel right. So my question back to you would be, how's it working out for you? Are you still able to show up at your best? If you feel like you're sacrificing something by fasting, I wouldn't do it. There's no research that indicates that fasting is a better strategy than eating often and just trimming a little bit of calories from your meals. They produce the same results in terms of weight loss. So it's not some sort of magic fix, I guess is my point. But a lot of people like to intermittent fast. It feels good for them. So I say go for it if it works for you, as long as you recognize that there's a high chance that there's cognitive impairment potential with intermittent fasting, because our brain doesn't work that way. After about 3 or 4 hours, it wants its glucose, it wants its energy, and it's going to find it no matter what. That is a fact of every human brain. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's sort of the reality of it. So let's move into that movement section. I asked you to get up and move around. The reason I did is because I wanted to see if anything changed when you got up in terms of how you feel, how well you feel like you're able to focus, how's your blood flow. Excuse me. A lot of times when we sit for too long, about that 2 to 3 hour mark, blood starts to pool in the bottom of our legs, right? And in that glute area, the butt. And where's it coming from? It's coming from the brain. So we have reduced blood flow to the brain, and we have reduced cognitive impairment. And again, there's another reason that we are unable to sort of show up at our best when we're sedentary, when we have a sedentary lifestyle. In fact, a sedentary lifestyle, inactivity, is now the 4th leading cause of death, the 4th leading risk factor for death, according to the World Health Organization. The only things ahead of it are smoking, diabetes, and high blood pressure. And so it's pretty amazing how sitting is becoming the new smoking in our world. When I asked you to get up and move around, I was trying to get you to start thinking about how would you show up if you started to move more often in your day. So I'm talking about movement and exercise here kind of interchangeably. We can exercise once a day, but then we can go to work and sit for 8 hours. And it kind of negates that hour of exercise in a sense. And conversely, we can get up and move throughout the day, but if we're not exercising and realizing those benefits, then we also could be putting ourselves at a little bit of risk in terms of our longevity of life, etc. Let me show you some of the benefits of movement and exercise. People who make exercise and movement a part of their regular day, there's much more broad benefit to them outside of just looking better or getting that body that you want, which is a lot of times the primary motivator for people when it comes to exercise. But there's so much more to it. For example, the American Council on Exercise did a study that showed a 70% improvement in making complex decisions just by being a regular exerciser. Let me show you a couple of other benefits. This first one, when I first heard it, it absolutely blew me away. Regular weight training increases the size of a part of our brain called the hippocampus, which is vital for long-term memory, learning, and emotional regulation. And it grows by as much as 15%. You can actually grow a part of your brain by being a regular exerciser. Exercise increases bone density. We can reverse a DEXA scan no matter the age. And again, no matter our age, we can encourage neurogenesis, or the creation of new neurons. That's why, having our kids get out there and play and be active is important. But even for us in our adult age, growing new neurons or brain cells, very important. Regular exercisers have improvements in performance across the board at work, decision-making, focus. We have a decreased risk of brain disease, depression, anxiety by as much as 60%. It also decreases a lot of the back, neck, and other joint pain that's a result of being sedentary, sitting at a computer, or what else? Text neck, right? When we have our head slightly in front of us all day long, looking down at our phones. And so exercise and regular movement throughout our day can help with that. And of course, it increases our longevity of life. So here's my client. This is what we looked like when we started. Very little movement through the day. She rolled out of bed. She got on her computer. She worked all day, very sedentary. Look at her energy levels. Look at those energy levels, really low. But then we made some changes, and they weren't serious changes. That 30 minutes of wait at the beginning of the day, it wasn't every day. This was about 3 days a week that she integrated this. She would stop and stretch every 3 to 4 hours, applying that oscillation principle we talked about in the first webinar. She took a short walk at lunch. She would get up and do a set of squats here and there, maybe walk the dog, maybe do 5 minutes of yoga in the evening. And look how that impacted those energy levels. And of course, her ability to make better decisions when she was eating, because she wasn't feeling sluggish. She was feeling energetic and prepared. So it can make a huge difference to integrate these concepts into your day. One quick, really interesting bit of information that could be really important to those of us who really struggle to find the time for exercise. There was a study done in 2013 on integrating what are called micro bursts of exercise into your day. So a set here, a set there, just all sprinkled throughout the day. Our body, they realized, can't distinguish between sprinkling exercise through the day and doing it all in 1 hour. We realize the same benefits in terms of long-term health, energy, mood regulation, etc., even body recomposition, so building muscle, losing fat, by sprinkling exercise through the day. So my challenge to you is this: if you have that story that you don't have time for exercise, find time to sprinkle it through your day. What do you have time for? Do you have time for one set of squats in between phone calls? Do you have time for getting a workout band and doing sets of band work in between, on your lunch hour or whatnot? And build your workout so that by the end of the day, you've done, 10, 15 sets and you've completed an entire bout of exercise. So something that I would highly recommend is integrating a little bit into your day. So how do we make it happen? Move often. Yeah, we're going back to that oscillation principle. If you can't see the pattern here between doing things more regularly and being more intentional about inserting these things into your day, I hope you're seeing the pattern now. Exercise as regularly as possible for your ability and schedule, right? Not everybody has the same ability and schedule. So do what's right for you, okay? Carve and protect your time, right? Change your mindset about movement and exercise. Any exercise routine that you enjoy is the right one. Any exercise that you enjoy is the right one. Let me repeat that. Anything you want to do that you will stick to, do that. Keep it varied. Have you ever heard of general adaptation syndrome? That is a phenomenon in the body where our body will get used to and accustomed to anything we throw at it. It's a wonderful thing. But for example, if I have a client who is very sedentary and I have her start by walking 10 minutes a day, the first couple of weeks, she's going to be quite fatigued. But what starts to happen? We start to adapt to that 10 minutes of walk. And then she starts coming back to me and saying, this isn't difficult anymore. So then from there, I can vary things. I can increase the duration of her walk. I can increase the speed of her walk. I can start adding 5 minutes of yoga right after her walk. Whatever it is that works for you, try to vary it up. And that's always going to keep your body on its toes and adapting and growing and changing in a good way. If you want the best bang for buck, combine strength training, cardiovascular activity. That's going to be your walking, your running, your biking, your Zumba, your dance, intervals of high intensity and low for the best results, because high intensity interval training gives you a little bit more of a metabolic boost. And then, of course, try new things. Be open to trying stuff. Of course, start with what you like and what you love, but be brave and get out there and browse the internet for things that you might. And yes, 5 minutes of exercise and activity counts that much. It does. Somebody just made the comment in the chat. Didn't realize that 5 minutes of activity counted for much. Absolutely. Any amount of time you're spending matters, especially if it starts to become cumulative during your day. Couple ways to actually make it happen. Set a timer to get up and move every hour. I see a lot of people have great success with being intentional about setting timers. Integrate those micro bursts of movement into your day. A set here, a set there. Remember, you can sprinkle your exercise through the day. Go for a 10-minute walk at lunchtime. I know it's pretty cold right now, so maybe you just get up and walk around your house or do some yoga. Family time doesn't always have to be sitting in front of a TV. What if you did something that was a little bit more active? And then I have some apps here at the bottom. Johnson & Johnson's 7-minute workout app is free and it's wonderful. I would recommend that one. Fitness Blender gives you some great opportunities for different types of exercise you can try. And then the Down Dog Yoga app, if you've wanted to try yoga, this is a good free app. It's very popular. And remember, you're going to get a copy of this slide deck so you can go back through these and download these apps if you don't have time to write all this down. Watching my time here. So the last thing that I want to cover, and if you're thinking of questions here with regard to movement and exercise, please let me know. I see a couple of them in the Q&A right now. How soon do you take protein after exercise? Actually, very interesting question. They have been back and forth the past 10 years on this. I would say if you're taking in protein within the hour, you're getting the best bang for buck, but up to 3 to 4 hours afterward you're still going to get benefit from that protein. If you are a guy, I would try to get in about 30 grams. And if you are a female, I would try to get in about 20 grams. Is there a way to boost one's metabolism? Yes, all of these strategies we're talking about. Move more often. Right? Get up and move more often. High intensity interval training will help with boosting your metabolism. Eating more often can help boost your metabolism, particularly if it's light, good choices, right? Healthy, balanced choices. And then do I have a recommended post-workout drink? I really like a protein called Isopure, but it's a little bit expensive, but any sort of whey protein isolate is, and I'll write that, whey protein isolates are the ones you want to look for on the counter. You can find them at Costco, Sam's Club, whatever kind of big box store you have, Amazon. But I personally just like the taste of Isopure. That being said, you can create your own post-workout drink by just having some Greek yogurt and some frozen fruit and maybe a little bit of like a peanut butter or a little bit of syrup, or not syrup, but sugar, something like that, just a teeny bit to give it some flavor. You could put together your own post-workout drinks that way and still get the combination of sugars and proteins that you're looking for in a good post-workout drink. And, keep in mind that there's a lot of good options out there in terms of healthy smoothies and things like that you can put together for a post-workout as well. What you're really looking for in a post-workout meal in general is enough protein to give you kind of that recoup on the muscles that you were just working so hard to build and to repair. And you're also looking for a little bit of sugar to replenish what's called your glycogen stores that you have depleted during that workout. So for me, post-workout can sometimes just look like an egg and a few egg whites and a slice of toast in the morning. And that is just as good in a lot of ways as a post-workout smoothie or protein shake or something like that. So I hope that helps you. All right, so now I'm looking at that time, making sure we have enough time for sleep. I know this is a big one for a lot of people. Again, I'm going to not poll you, but if I polled this group and asked, how's your sleep these days? I would bet that we are much in line with the rest of America. About 20% of Americans, 27% to be exact, actually get enough sleep. The rest of us don't. We need 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep per night to be at our best. 7 to 9 hours. So how many of us can actually say we're getting 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep per night? If we're anything like the average American, only about 27% of this group would agree with that. And no, you don't fall outside those lines. Before you challenge me in your head here, 99% of the global population falls within that average of 7 to 9 hours. Only 1% of the global population can thrive off of less than 7 or needs more than 9. So chances are that's not you. And this is across thousands and thousands of studies that have validated the same range, 7 to 9 hours. So, oh, good. Somebody said 7:30 average per your Fitbit. Let me show you some of these amazing benefits of getting enough sleep. It's only been in the past 20 years that we've really started to realize just how active our brain really is when we're sleeping. It is absolutely incredible, the information that is out there right now and what our brain is doing during sleep stages. I'll get to your question, Jason, in just a second. I saw it. So let me give you some examples. In stage 1 sleep, that light REM sleep, we are actually working through emotional regulation and relationship issues, anything that we were emotionally charged with during the day. We're actually trying to work that out in stage 1 sleep. We're not just going to bed and restoring and waking up. We're doing things in our sleep. We're working out problems. So if you have a fight with a significant other, you're likely going to be working through that unconsciously in stage 1. In stage 2, we're working on our motor skills. So think about if you have a child that you've taught to ride a bike. The days that you're teaching them to ride a bike and they're going to bed, in stage 2 sleep, they're repeating that new movement pattern over and over and over in their head. And stages 3 and 4 are deep sleep, incredibly valuable, probably the most important stage of sleep for a lot of different reasons. This is where we really restore and repair ourselves, renew our energy. But another couple interesting things, we problem solve during that time. So if we're stuck on an issue in our waking time, we're going to work on it in those stages. And we're going to be flushing out a lot of neural trash in the brain that shouldn't be there. We don't want that to build up and accumulate. That's actually been correlated with brain diseases like memory loss, Alzheimer's, dementia. There's actually a really great TED Talk. If you have a chance to watch it and you're interested, just Google TED Talk, dishwasher, sleep. And you'll find it, I promise. TED Talk, dishwasher, sleep. I think it's called One More Reason to Get a Good Night's Sleep. So if that's something you're interested in. But my point is, our brain is very active through every stage, and we need every stage of sleep in order to show up at our best. Jason asked, do kids need more sleep than adults? Yes, they do. There are actually some really great charts out there on the National Sleep Foundation website that can show you the recommended amount of sleep for children. And yes, it is higher than adults. So let me show you a little bit of the impact of what happens when we don't get our 7 to 9 hours. Just one night of sleep loss decreases our cognitive power by 30%. 2 weeks of that, of sustained sleep deprivation, is the same as going to work after having 2 alcoholic beverages. So it's the same as showing up at work buzzed in terms of our cognitive abilities. So I thought that was a pretty funny stat. 3 times more likely to get sick, dramatically decreases our decision-making skills, empathy, emotional regulation, mood regulation. If you've ever had a newborn at home, you can resonate with all of these. And if you have a newborn at home right now, my thoughts and prayers to you, you're just going to have to ride this out, right? Because I can't help you with that. Sleep deprivation is the norm for a few months when you've got a little one, a little newborn. But for the rest of us who have the power to work on our sleep health, here are some suggestions. Number 1, pay attention to your caffeine intake. I'm not saying don't take in caffeine, but I am saying that it does have a half-life of 6 hours. So keep an eye on your afternoon caffeine intake. It could be what's keeping you up at night. Maybe you wake up frequently or you have trouble going to sleep. Kristen, how much time should be spent in each sleep stage? They're each 90 minutes long. about 90 minutes long. And you want to go through them a few times, all stages a few times at night. Here's another suggestion. Are you drinking alcohol before bed on weeknights, especially? Because alcohol, it's a diuretic. So you wake up in the middle of the night having to go to the bathroom. But another thing is that it might help you fall asleep, but you're actually bypassing stages 1 and 2, which you know now are very important. You're going straight to deep sleep, and it throws off that cycle a little bit. And it definitely it significantly affects your productivity and your sleep cycles. And it moves to storage very quickly. Alcohol doesn't have any nutritional value for us, so it goes straight to our fat deposits. So if you can, I would test out, if you're having sleep issues, remove alcohol or remove caffeine for just a week or so and see if it helps you. And if it does, you know that that's the culprit. So a couple of recommendations around sleep. Number 1, try to create the right sleep environment for you. Make it cool and dark in the house, especially before bed, maybe 30 minutes before bed. It doesn't really help if you have lights on and TV's going and a phone in your face, and then you turn it all off and expect your brain to just go to bed. So if you're having trouble, you might want to consider shifting your sleep environment a little bit. Minimize alcohol and caffeine. Change your mindset about sleep a little bit. It is important. It is critical. It is the most important, probably in our body section. I think it's the most important habit that you can put into place is healthy sleep habits, because they tend to spiral and impact our nutrition choices and impact our ability to get our exercise. I think sleep is one of those really important strategies we want to focus on. And take steps to quiet your mind, like I said, before bed. A lot of people talk about that blue light emission and having the yellow light that iPhone came out with. Well, that's helpful and all if you're looking at a phone before bed, but what's the content of what you're looking at? If it's excitable at all, if it's news, gosh forbid, politics, something like that. If it's your favorite Netflix series, you're actually stimulating that prefrontal cortex to wake up and pay attention. So regardless of the light, you're still on, and it's hard to fall asleep. So here's a couple of action items that you could implement right away tonight. I'll make it cool and dark in the house 30 minutes before bed, signaling the brain that it's time to sleep. I'll play with not having alcohol on 1 to 2 days a week, see if it helps. Maybe you'll switch to a non-caffeinated beverage after 2 p.m. Maybe you meditate or breathe deeply 3 minutes before bed, twice per week. See if that helps. Maybe that helps you quiet the mind. And one strategy a lot of people really report back really loving, and I do this, is I journal before bed a couple times a week. I just get out all the thoughts, all the to-dos for the next day, anything I'm worrying about, anything, that's on my mind. I do what's called a mind dump, right? And I get it all out before bed. And that does tend to help me with not waking up in the middle of the night. So I'm 1 minute over. I was hoping to have some time. I know we've been able to answer a few questions here in the middle of our webinar, but here are some reflective questions for you. Which of these areas are you struggling with? Is it nutrition, exercise, sleep? And what's the best entry point to working on that body pathway? What are the obstacles that get in the way for you in particular? And how can we kind of change your story about those obstacles in particular? How can we change your mindset? And what's one small way that you can move in the right direction? So when you get this slide deck, the copy of this, and you sit down and you think about these things, this is actually a great before bed exercise, reflective exercise. I want you to think about, what is one thing I can take away from this webinar to implement right away? So I apologize that I'm at time here, but what I'm going to do is thank you for being here. We'll have our next webinar coming up soon. I believe it's, you know what? I don't remember. I think it's March 3rd. I apologize in advance because I'm pretty sure that it's in March 3rd. Thank you, Shelley. I forgot to write that down. So March 3rd, we're going to have our next webinar. It's going to be on mindset. And I'm going to stay on right now for anybody who does have any questions. I'll just kind of stick around until just for a few minutes. For the rest of you, thank you for joining. And I will see you on March 3rd for our next webinar. And in the meantime, if anybody has any questions, happy to answer them. So good night to those of you who are logging off. Yes, my heart goes out to you as a nurse. So what can nurses do who work 12-hour night shifts? Here's the thing. You can catch up a little bit on your days off with sleep deprivation. There is a little bit to that. There is great power in taking naps if you can, if there's any way to get in power naps. But it is a profession that is just chronically struggles with sleep. First responders and nurses definitely struggle with sleep, and doctors, of course, too. My suggestion would be, if at all possible, try to find time to sneak in a cat nap here and there, or try to the best of your ability to catch up on your days off if you can. And that's really the best we could probably do with that. Angelica, do I know anything about a FODMAP diet? Only that I've known people who have had to follow them. Do you have any particular questions about them? Because I know typically sometimes when you have some sort of underlying like a issue or some sort of medical concern, you'll follow a FODMAP. Jason, as a firefighter, we learn to take a nap whenever possible. Yes, my best friend's husband is a lieutenant, and he is a king nap taker, even if it's for 5 or 10 minutes, like you said. So maybe we could get that strategy in there for the nurses. Let me see. I have one on the Q&A here. Is it okay to exercise after 10 p.m.? The question would be, excuse me, let's work backwards. Will you be able to ensure that you can get 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night? And are you going to be able to fall asleep? So to answer your question, I'm going to ask you back a question. Can you get 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night? And will you be able to fall asleep? I can fall asleep like a baby right after exercise, so it's not a problem for me. But for some people, it's really difficult to do. My question would be, maybe we, or maybe my response would be, maybe we tweak the duration of that exercise, or maybe the intensity of it. So for example, if you can get to bed by 11 p.m. and you can wake up at 7 or whatnot and get your 7 to 9 hours, then I say go for it. But maybe it's not a high intensity, super crazy workout. Maybe it's something like yoga or something more low impact. Any suggestions on targeting abdominal fat? I have good news and bad news on that. You can't target areas of the body. So that's the bad news. The good news is that you get your abs in the kitchen. And so when you say targeting abdominal fat, this is an area where watching your diet pretty closely and what you're taking in can actually have incredible impact on losing that abdominal fat. I'll say to you, if you tend to gain around your midsection quickly, that's probably going to be the last place you're going to lose when you're losing weight, but don't give up hope. It is absolutely possible to lose abdominal fat, but no amount of planks are going to help you if you're not lining up your food choices in the kitchen. So I would probably take a look at, what are you eating? Maybe what are some areas that you might be overindulging? Are there opportunities for more proteins and vegetables in your diet? So I'm trying to point you in the direction of your diet. That's usually where we're going to gain and lose our body fat, is in the kitchen. A lot of people think that the gym is the place you go to get the body you want. It's actually the kitchen. The gym is where we go to get the muscle, and the kitchen is where we go to lose the fat. So I know that doesn't really help. I wish there was a magic answer, eat this food or do this one move and you can target abdominal fat, but unfortunately it doesn't work that way. Thank you so much, Serena. I appreciate your kind words. Do we have any other questions? Because I see a lot of people still hanging on this webinar and listening in. So you might have some questions of your own. Remember that you can ask them anonymously in the Q&A and even on the chat. How about, did I touch on keto? I did not touch on keto, but I am happy to touch on keto. Um, Keto is a very extreme diet, and it is based on some science around ketones that are produced in the body when you eat very little carbohydrate. There are no long-term studies yet on how it impacts our long-term health, our metabolism, and our organ and brain health. I will tell you that there are major red flags for me around any diet that requires us to dramatically decrease a food group altogether. And most people that do keto lose a lot of weight, and it's not sustainable, and then they gain that back. So I don't know if that helps you, but it's not something that I would ever recommend. To me, on day one of your diet, you should be feeling better and not worse. So anytime somebody tells me, oh, just wait a couple weeks, it'll get easier, that's usually a red flag for me. I probably wouldn't recommend it. Perry, you said, how about food that improves your metabolism? That's a great question. I would say the answer to that would be yes. Reducing the amount of sugar in your diet in general is a great way to improve your metabolism. When you're talking about metabolism, you're talking about how many calories you burn per day in general. When you eat more often, believe it or not, that is one of those big strategies that helps you improve your metabolism. It also helps you keep you fuller for longer, so that you're making better choices in the next meal and in the next meal. You just have to make sure you're not overeating in every one of those meals. So it's also about kind of eating behavior, not just a particular food that improves your metabolism. But I would say that foods to minimize would be the processed foods, fast foods, anything that comes out of a box or a drive-through. In general, I know there's things that you can order at every drive-through that would be better choices, but generally speaking, prioritizing more fruits and vegetables in your diet and kind of healthy sources of protein would be a really good way to improve your metabolism, because it provides you the energy you need to get through the next 3 to 4 hours, especially when you're building those balanced kind of Harvard plate looking meals. So I'd think a little more broadly about what are some behaviors around food that would help you. Thank you, Perry. I appreciate that. So looks like we covered all the questions, pretty sure. Still see a few people on here. So does anybody have any other questions? If not, I think we could probably, here we go. Are all nuts okay to eat for a snack? Answer would be yes. Almonds would be a little bit better. They have antioxidants. They're a little bit healthier for you. I would say if you have any chronic digestive issues, I might avoid peanuts in particular. Some people just don't process them really well, but yeah, any nut or seed is really good for you. There are some that are a little bit more healthy than others. I personally just buy whatever is buy one, get one in terms of nuts and seeds. I really like when they have the mixed nuts on sale, because then you get that variety. And if I want to splurge, sometimes I'll just get macadamia nuts, even though they're probably not the best nut to eat, but I think they taste the best. But yes, they are. Just watch your portion sizes, Nicole, on the nuts and seeds, because a little bit goes a long way. It wouldn't be something I would keep at your desk, much like a jar of peanut butter. Might want to not keep it there because it's very calorie dense and not necessarily something you would want sitting there in front of you at all times. Remember, the thumb is how many nuts and seeds you'd want in one sitting. So a little bit goes a long way. And I would pair it, if you can, with some sort of carbohydrate, a vegetable or a fruit, or, some sort of whole grain. Let's see, I think I got one other question. What do I think about organic versus conventional foods? That is an excellent question. And I would say if you can afford eating organic and you feel better about eating it, go ahead. To be honest with you, there's not a ton of longitudinal data that it is better for you. And one of the reasons for that is it's really hard to define what better means. There's in a lot of or conventionally grown foods, there are traces of pesticide, but the traces don't tend to have enough impact on us to make a difference. A lot of people disagree with that. It's actually a highly contested conversation in the nutrition world. I would say, sure, if you can grow your own food or buy organic, go for it. Why not? But I don't necessarily think there's enough data out there personally to convince me to buy all organic. I'll buy it here and there, especially because honestly, it just lasts a little bit longer, especially if it's locally sourced. And then somebody else said, how do you catch sleep with a baby and a toddler? I'm tired most of the time. And what snacks would be better or food since I have no time to sit and eat and you're also breastfeeding? So a lot of questions in one. To answer one thing, make sure you're eating. Keep that milk supply up. So the more that you're eating, the better. Don't worry about necessarily calories right now. Just make sure that you're picking good healthy choices. Keep your protein up, eat lots of carbohydrates, because baby and toddler are definitely taking its toll on you. Your baby comes first, when it comes to your energy output. So they're going to steal a lot of your energy. So make sure you're eating a lot. I think it's something around 600 to 800 extra calories that you should be taking in when you're breastfeeding. So how do you catch sleep? Any way you can, much like the firefighter on the conversation said, if you can sleep when the baby sleeps, please try to. I know that's easier said than done. I've gone through it twice now, and there's always stuff to be done around the house, but to the best of your ability, try to steal and prioritize a nap at least once a day. And just get what's easy. Like we were just talking about nuts and seeds. You can eat a quick handful of that and get 200 calories really quickly. Spoonful of peanut butter is the same way. Maybe you buy some protein powder or something like that, shake it up and drink that while you're on the go. So anytime you can get nutrient dense and calorie dense foods in the same sitting, that's a really good way to go. Maybe look for some bars that are healthy and that have a good combination of proteins, carbohydrates, and fats that you can eat quickly. And then I'm going to take one more question. Your thoughts on Splenda for diabetics. I would say as long as you're not having a significantly high amount of them, I haven't really seen a whole lot on Splenda in the data that indicates that it's something to avoid. So I would say it would be totally fine, especially for diabetics. Yeah, to answer your question, you asked for your thoughts on Splenda for diabetics. Absolutely. I've watched artificial sweeteners here and there. The general rule of thumb from my experience in talking with dietitian friends is a little bit of artificial sweetener is fine. If you're relying on it all day long and you have a lot of different sources of Splenda all day, every day for weeks and months and years on end, then maybe you'll need to worry and pay attention. But I think Splenda is one of those more safe artificial sweeteners. All right, so I think that we've answered all the questions. I still see several people on here, so thank you so much for staying on. I know we went way over on our time by 15 minutes, but I hope that with some of the questions that were asked, you got a little bit more information that we bargained for. So thank you for staying on. And I will see you on March 3rd for our next webinar. And again, you guys have a wonderful night, and thank you for joining. And I hope that you got some benefit to this conversation. All right, take care, everybody, and have a great night.